If you're responsible for creating an HR or people strategy, you probably put a huge amount of care and effort into it because you want to do the right thing for your organisation and the people within it. You want to do a brilliant job. But what if, despite all of your hard work, there could be one mistake, a really key mistake that you're making? That's what we're diving into in today's episode of HR Coffee Time, the podcast that helps HR and people professionals build successful and fulfilling careers. I'm Fay Wallis, a career and leadership coach for HR professionals and the creator of the Essential HR Planner and the Inspiring HR Leadership Programme, as well as being the host of this show. Now, creating a strategy is something that I know so many of you are expected to do, but also, many of you might never have been shown how to do it, which means that you end up just guessing or piecing together a strategy based on things you've seen other people do, or maybe using a template that you've seen is popular in a different department in the organisation that you work in. To talk you through what this mistake could be and to help bring some clarity for what you could be doing instead and how to make a brilliant impact with your strategy, I am joined by Dean Corbett, who is a Chief People Officer with more than 20 years experience across insurance, healthcare, retail and tech. He's also a master's qualified psychologist and coach. He's currently training in psychotherapy and he works with organisations to design what he calls people-shaped business plans. You might also know him as the co-host of HR Unfiltered, another HR podcast. In our conversation, Dean talks about what he thinks that biggest mistake is that HR professionals often make when creating a strategy, and more importantly, what to do instead. We also chat about his favourite strategy format, what it really takes to build a strategy that makes a difference, and some simple steps that you can use to start thinking more strategically straight away. And right at the end, he shares some brilliant book recommendations if you'd like to explore strategy in more depth after you've finished with this episode. So if strategy is something you've never really felt 100% sure about, or you just want to be confident that you're approaching it in the best possible way, you are in the right place. Let's get started and go ahead and meet Dean. Welcome to the show, Dean. I am so excited about diving into the topic of HR strategy with you today, because I know that so many people listening are interested in learning more about it. So thank you so much for joining me.
Faye, the pleasure is all mine. I'm truly delighted and honoured to be here. So thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. And I know that you've got a really strong view on the biggest mistake you see people making when it comes to HR strategy. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this with you today. And I thought I'd start off by making that my first question. So are you happy to share with us, what is that biggest mistake that you think people make?
Yeah, I actually think it's twofold and they're sort of interconnected and symbiotic, I think is the right word. It's when you have a HR strategy at all. And then within that, you've got the reward strategy and the learning strategy and the listening strategy and all sorts of things like that, because then you just get this sort of monumental document that incorporates all of these different elements. And that, for me, the reason that's a mistake is it starts to dilute the impact of what you're trying to do as a business, and how HR and the HR and people effort sort of contributes towards that. So if I give you an example that I run into far too often, your overarching business strategy might be grow revenue by X%, improve margin, and to do those things, launch new products or go into new markets. And then what happens a little bit down the line is the HR function or the people function comes forward and says, great, to do those things, we're going to improve engagement, launch leadership development, focus on well-being and refresh our values. And I think all of those things in themselves are great things to do, providing they can be directly linked to the growing revenue, the improving margin, the launching the new product or going into a new market. And more often than not, within those four things that I've just listed, there's no link to the three things I listed around the business strategy. So if I think about sort of how I think about this myself as a sort of remedy, I would say take those three questions or take those three statements, increase revenue, improve margin, launch new product. I would be saying, what does the HR or people team need to do in order to support the increase in revenue? What does the team need to do in order to protect or expand margin? What does the HR or people team need to do to reduce commercial, not just employee risk? What does the HR and people function need to do to increase productivity? And how might we start looking at sort of capabilities that we can now have from AI, or the human capabilities that are exclusively human? What roles do they play in that? And so if you can't answer those, I think, and you and I have talked about this before, I think you're in the territory of what Gary Hamel calls occupational hobby. It's sort of helping this professional need. I want to do this lovely culture thing over here, rather than doing this lovely culture thing over here directly impacts how we're increasing our revenue. And so that to me feels like a pretty big mistake. But the good news is, Faye, it's very resolvable. So if I take that same example, I'd be looking at, what do we need to hire for to increase our revenue? Or how do we need to incentivize to increase our revenue? That is a perfectly good, strategically aligned people plan. Does that answer your question?
It answers it perfectly. Thank you so much. I suppose what I'm hearing here, the key messages are that there's a danger that the HR or people strategy isn't directly linked into the overarching business plan. This is the key message that I'm hearing from you. How would you see it as being presented then? Because I think for a lot of people, they'll be picturing in their mind a piece of paper or a PowerPoint deck that has got their strategy written all over it. And I know that you've just said how important it is, it links directly with the overarching business strategy. Do you actually, from a visual perspective, how would you see this all coming together?
Yeah, so I think if you're a large organization, if I think back to an example of a large organization, then I can share one of a small organization if we have time. Large organizations tend to have quite long, quite detailed plans at the beginning of their year, and all of that. And I think within each component of that plan, again, take the increased revenue example, within that, you'll have a whole load of people, things that need to happen, or people levers you need to pull that directly or indirectly can contribute to that objective. And so I would see that as all being on one page under the heading increase revenue. I wouldn't have, to be really specific, I wouldn't have a separate document that's called Organization X's HR strategy. I would put it all into the same document.
Great. Okay, that's brilliant to have it clear like that. And when it comes to having it all in one document, have you got a favorite format that you've come across, or a framework that you particularly like and that you think works really well?
Yes, I do actually. I think so. It's not one document that's been given to me by a strategy book or whatever. It's actually something that I've worked on and iterated over time based on different contexts. But I really like, I can't remember the name of the individual. I think it was Roger Martin. But I like the framework, where we play, how we win, what capabilities and roles do we need in our business in order to win in the territory we're choosing to play, in the product we're trying to play with, the required ways of behaviors and ways of working that we need in order to do those things, and the financial metrics that we're sort of attributing to the outcomes that tell us whether we're on track or not. That feels like a good one pager to me. So I think, to answer the question, I think it's an iteration of the Roger Martin work.
For anyone watching the YouTube version, I just quickly ran out of my room in excitement when I heard Dean say that, because this is such a weird coincidence, Dean. I have literally just started reading Roger Martin's book. So I've dashed out and got the book from my bedside table. For anyone who wants to learn more about what Dean is talking about, I mean, honestly, Dean, I feel like you're a mind reader. As I've started reading this book, I've been thinking, I have to talk about this on HR Coffee Time. This is so, so helpful, and a different way of looking at strategy than I've talked about on the show before. So I'm going to hold up the book for anyone watching, and for anyone listening, I'll just tell you what it's called. It's called Playing to Win: How Strategy Really Works, and it is written by A.G. Lafley and Roger L. Martin. So I'm slightly freaked out that you just quoted or just recommended something from a book that I have literally started reading last week.
I'm delighted you're reading it. So I really enjoyed it, and it has, in various guises, it's been very helpful for me in not just designing the people plan of an organization, but in facilitating the strategy development for it within exec teams, right? And you can also add loads of stuff to it. So you can put the OKR framework, which I think in this conversation we'll come on to. But the reason I like it specifically from a people perspective is, if I go way back to Dave Ulrich's work, I think it was the Leader Code or Leadership Code, he talked extensively about organizational capabilities and HR's unique role in developing them, keeping an eye on them, evolving them. And this work brings all of that in. And so for me, that means that the HR stuff, the people stuff, naturally falls within the overarching business strategy, not separate to, not instead of. It's there right at the center. He talks really eloquently about the capabilities that we uniquely have to help us play and win in the markets and in the product spheres that we're trying to achieve in. That's HR's gold.
Absolutely. But I know there'll be some people listening who'll be thinking, well, what are they though? It's all very well saying, oh, yeah, we need to be directly impacting the overall business strategy and we need to be pulling on the people levers. But how do I figure out what they are? Like, this feels really difficult. This feels really hard. It would be great to hear your advice around that, Dean, for someone who's maybe in that senior leadership conversation. They're part of it. They can help shape what that strategy is going to be, but they're a bit scared because they think, I don't really know how the HR or people function can be supporting this. I've not really had this opportunity before. I've been approaching this in the way that you described wasn't the correct way of doing it. I've been saying these are all the things I think we should do, and I know they will benefit the organization overall, but I don't really know how to make sure the things I'm doing will directly impact the core things that the organization wants to focus on.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair question. And I would say that this stuff can be really scary because we talked about it before we started recording. Imposter syndrome sets in. I think I've talked at length in other forums about how the people profession hasn't been developed necessarily to think and be strategic. And then there's a demand on us to think and be strategic. That's probably another podcast. Ultimately, what it comes down to is keeping very clear about the BAU activity that you're doing and how that in itself can be strategic. So you're already hiring. Strategy simply says, what are you hiring and how quickly and why? You're already probably developing people in some way, shape, or form. Strategy says, well, what capabilities are we developing and why? And again, if I go back to my original answer about the mistakes we make, too often I hear HR's capable of delivering a leadership program, so we're just going to roll that out, when actually the leadership development program isn't something that's going to enable the strategy at all. What's going to enable the strategy is much better account management capabilities or much better customer centricity behaviors across the organization. So we should be developing things like that. So that's the first part. When I think more broadly about capabilities, I think about what does our company do and why does it do it? So our purpose and our sort of the product that we've got or the service we're creating. And I think about, well, what capabilities are required in order to do those things? So to develop a product, you need to have a capability of innovation. But you probably, if you're in a very competitive market, you need to be capable of doing it quickly. So the capability of speed. And so it's just really thinking about what do we try and achieve as a business? And then what are the human things that need to happen in order to create that, do that, deliver that? And so to be more specific, it's really, if we're developing a tech product in the financial market, what financial savvy do we need in our business? What mindset do our people need to have? Not accountancy, but being financially literate might be one of those things. So that's a capability that we know we need to develop. If we need to be more innovative, the culture of the organization, and we're very good at talking about culture, but I don't think in a particularly strategic way. What culture do we need in order to be innovative? Well, we need to be able to be more tolerant of failure. We need to be more tolerant of having a high error rate. And we also need to know that we can fail in a risk mitigated way or a risk managed way. If your culture is capable of doing that because the people within the organization don't like failing, they're perfectionists, something's going to have to change. And that would be a strategic maneuver from a people perspective that meets the capability need of innovation or speed.
Oh, I'm so pleased I asked you that question, Dean. Thank you. It's great to have it brought to life like that. And I really hope that for anyone listening who's feeling a bit nervous about this, it's helped give them a real clear direction on how to go about doing this. I'm intrigued now how you've gone about developing these skills, because I know it can be really helpful if you're someone who hasn't had the opportunity to approach strategy and being strategic in this way before, and they can hear what you're saying and it all makes sense. But I know it can be really helpful to know, well, how did you get to this point where you can do this and where you can very easily answer that question and provide lots of examples? Because you wouldn't have started off your HR or people career being able to do it all. What is it that's helped you get to that point?
That's a lovely question, and there's a potentially long answer, so I'll try and keep it concise. The first thing is, I think, so I very, very early on in my career, while I was doing my degree, I was a support manager in Pizza Huts. And as much as I laugh about that experience now, actually what it taught me was, what are we here to do? And how do we do it according to our sort of standards guide? And it was really just applying curiosity to, why do we do it that way? Why are product standards so important to the Pizza Hut experience and the customer value proposition? I didn't even know that sort of language back then. I was 18, right? But what I did learn was, when we do things in a certain way, we meet the financial goals of what my restaurant was trying to achieve. We set our target at the beginning of the week or the quarter or the month, whatever. And we all knew that our role in that was to manage a tight, disciplined operation, get the product quality good every single time, make sure that every customer was dealt with within the time standards that we'd set ourselves. And that was it. And so it was really, that was a formative experience for me. If I then roll forward through my career, not only have I had the benefit and privilege of being managed by truly strategic and highly commercial people, which really does help, by the way. So if you're thinking about your ideal line manager and you want to be strategic, please find somebody that's going to teach you that and give you their time and their expertise. So I've had that privilege. That's certainly been something that I've benefited from. But then when I've been sort of hustling it out on my own, because now I don't report to those people, now I have the privilege of reporting into the CEO or the founder or the sort of most senior person in the organization. I listen. I ask questions. I'm curious. I know you talked about this at length on all of your CPO interviews. I think almost all of them mention curiosity. It is such an underrated and taken advantage of skill, but it's the most advantageous. If you can just build the confidence somehow to go, why do we do it like that, Mr. Product Leader? How do we talk to our customers, Mr. Salesman? If you could just do that, you're really on the way to understanding not just how work gets done, but how that work could contribute should the strategy change while you're working in that organization. They're the keys for me, really. Understand how the business works, be curious about the ins and outs of it, and surround yourself with people that think in this way.
You're right. There's such a strong overlap and link to what you're advising us all of now and what we heard last year throughout the Chief People Officer interviews. For anyone listening or watching who's thinking, what are these CPO interviews that Dean and Fay are talking about? I did a special series of the show that ran for 12 episodes. It started off with interviewing David D'Souza from the CIPD about the chief people officer role. And then it moved into 11 interviews with chief people officers. And I asked them all exactly the same questions to try and see what commonalities there are in that role and what's required and what it's like. So it's fascinating that I haven't asked you, I don't think, any of the questions directly that I asked them, but still those same themes are coming out. When you talked about really understanding the requirements of a business and how a business operates from your time at Pizza Hut, that makes me think of what Kanika Mehra shared in her episode. And if everyone listens or watches to the end, please do. I'll make sure that I let you know what the titles and episode numbers are of any of these episodes that I mentioned. So she talks about actually, if you want to develop that business acumen, to spend time with the people within the organization who interact directly with the organization's customers, and you'll get a much better understanding for what's going on. And then other people on the show, like Jane Beeston, talked about actually getting involved in business projects that don't necessarily obviously fit within HR or the people space. And then, oh gosh, there are countless other examples. I think she also talked about curiosity being such an important skill. These are things that just came up again and again and again, but they're probably the first times, I think, with those two interviews that I began really noticing those answers, which is why I now can't think of all the other interviews where there were examples, but they came up continuously. So I hope that's a really good signal for anyone listening to think, right, this is what I'm going to do. This is going to really help me with my HR or people career. So thank you, Dean, for sharing that. So I'd love to move us along now to talk about very quickly OKRs, because I recently did an episode about OKRs and it was quite theoretical, whereas you've actually got direct experience of working with the OKR framework. For, again, anyone who's listening who hasn't caught that episode yet, OKRs stand for objectives and key results, and they're a way of planning and communicating and acting on the organization strategy. So it would be great to hear your experience and where you think they can work really well and maybe where there might be some challenges with them.
Yeah, I'm actually going to start with your last point because I'm really grateful you mentioned it. OKRs are a way of enacting the strategy. They are not the strategy itself. So if I think about an example of that, the organization's strategy, let's go back to improving margin, for example. The strategy might be improve margin, but your O objective would be one thing that contributes to that, and the key results are the things that you're using quarter by quarter or whatever window of measurement time you're applying to tell you whether you're on or off track towards that objective. I think OKRs, I've seen them done really, really well, and I've seen them done really, really badly. Done well, the objective is aspirational. So if I think way back to the original Google example, it was 10 million Chrome users by year end or something, which they knew was not achievable at all. But their key results then were each quarter to get towards that 10 million, it was we want 100,000 by the end of Q1, we want 350,000 by the end of Q2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they're the more realistic, more achievable things if you talk about smart objective terms. So they're the specifics, the measurable, the achievable. The objective is the aspiration. We want to be the biggest web browser in the world. Perfect objective. Where it's done badly is the objective actually becomes an activity. We're going to do this thing for this customer, or we're going to do this thing in this market. That's not going to get you anywhere because frankly, you might as well just have that as a key result. So that's where O's and KRs get sort of conflated. So that's done badly. I think if I put it into very simplistic terms based on an example of what I've done, the business objective was we are going to improve margin. So the objectives were something to do with productivity improvement, something to do with cost discipline, something to do with decision-making speed. And then the key results of those things each quarter were this productivity bit over here in our business is going to be improved by 18%. This bit of our cost base is going to be reduced by X. This bit of our, we're going to take these bits of our processes out so that we can speed up decision making. So very specific, very actionable things. Does that help?
It is very helpful. And I've now read up quite a lot about OKRs, where I've become a little bit obsessed with them at the moment. And the things you're describing are things that I've read about being, particularly important to be aware of. So it's just lovely getting to hear you talk about it from your own experience rather than me, hearing about it from a book. So it's great to know that. You mentioned AI earlier, and when I've been thinking about OKRs a lot, thinking, if I wanted to try using these for myself, how would I do it? I found AI incredibly helpful at saying, this is what I'm thinking for an objective. Is it correct for the OKR framework? Am I doing this correctly? And it's absolutely brilliant because, it'll come back and go, no, what you're describing there is the key result. You need to try, rephrasing this or saying what outcome it is that you're aiming towards ultimately. And so that's where I just think when it comes to AI, I'm a big fan of it, to be honest. I think it can be so helpful as like a thinking partner or for refining stuff. Obviously, for anyone listening, make sure whatever your rules are within your workplace as to which AI tool you're allowed to use, and you can't share confidential information on there. But I think it can be incredibly helpful. What's your thoughts around AI, Dean? Have you tried using it in this way at all, or do you like the capability it has?
I love the capability it has, and I'm an advocate of the idea that it's an amplifier rather than a substitute. Partly because I'm pro-humanist, and I really don't like the idea of not having a job 5 years from now. But also because I think it's just not ready to replace us and the that we all bring. But if I think about AI in two guises, yes, I would say absolutely use it as a thought partner or a sounding board, but be very discerning, like you've described, in taking what it says. Don't take it as read. Just basically ask it some questions, get it to thought partner you, challenge you, ask it to be brutal. I love that one because that makes you sort of I think it starts to reduce that positivity bias that it's become a little bit famous for. It wants you to like it, and therefore it's going to give you answers it thinks you want to hear. Take that away by asking for it to be brutal and critical and harsh, right? That's how I do it, and I'm all right with the responses that I get. There is a second component when it comes to AI, though, if I think specifically around OKRs, and that's how it's deployed in organizations in pursuit of OKRs. So you might, if I take the productivity margin example or the productivity discipline example, what you might say is your objective is we're going to automate as much as we possibly can. No numbers, no specific. But your key result would be we're using X, where X platform is in place by Y date, and it's seeing A, B, and C results in terms of cost base, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, that the answer to that question is twofold.
It's great to hear your thoughts on it. And I have this slightly sick feeling now that I'll be listening back or watching back this interview in 5 years' time and cringing, thinking, I can't believe that's how we were talking about AI, because I just know things are going to advance so much. It's all just moving so quickly, isn't it?
It is. And I would be surprised if it's 5 years, Faye, to be honest. I think you might be looking back in 12 months.
I think that might be why I haven't covered AI on the show so far. I don't know how I've suddenly let it sneak in here, probably just because I think at the moment it can genuinely be helpful for that, which is why I'm mentioning it. But I haven't had anyone come on the show to talk about it explicitly because I just think it's all going to be different again so soon. So yes. Anyway, I better stop us talking about AI. I'm going slightly off piste now. I'm really conscious of time. I wish I could keep you here forever, Dean. It's so wonderful to get to talk to you about this. And I know that everyone listening and myself are just so grateful to you for sharing your expertise and experience. But as we are coming to the end of our time together, I'm going to ask you a question, which I'm planning on asking all of the guests who come on the show. And that is, have you got a book recommendation for us, or perhaps a video recommendation for us that you think would be great for anyone listening or watching today to read or watch?
I once saw a video actually on, this is completely off the cuff, but in saying video, you've reminded me. I once saw a video, I think on YouTube, about how IKEA used the Roger Martin example. I'll find the link and send it to you, and you can include it in the show notes. Sadly, with me, there is no one book. So I'm just going to reel off what I think. You asked earlier about where I learned in the earlier days of my career, where I learned some of these skills. Reading what I think is now a classic, Linda Holbeach's Aligning HR and Business Strategy. That was gold for me. I read it as part of my degree, and it was a brilliant primer, I think. Very technical and now 25 years old, but a very good book. I think classic book again, Peter Sengin, The Five Forces, I think, or The Fifth Discipline is the actual name of the book, I think. But you've had a guest on whose book I enjoyed, Max McEwen, but a bit of a left field one, Think Again by Adam Grant. And the reason I recommend that in a strategic context is if you can't change your mind in short periods of time based on new information and evolving information in this day and age, any strategy you try and do is going to fail. So that book teaches you the mental frame in which to develop strategy and keep evolving and iterating, because we're moving so quickly, to the point you made on AI. I also think some work by Perry Timms and the Polymorphic Organization on Substack is always worth a read. Yeah, that's probably enough. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. We're all going to be spoilt for choice now with all of these resources. Thank you, Dean, for recommending them all. And I'll make sure that I put links to everything Dean has just mentioned in the show notes and in the YouTube description. So all that leaves me to say now, Dean, is a massive thank you for your time today. But also, before I completely say goodbye, for anyone listening who thinks, oh my goodness, I'd really appreciate some support from Dean. I would love to know more about how he might be able to help me and my organization. What is the best way of people finding out more about you and your work or getting in touch with you? And would you like to share a little bit more about how you could actually help?
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Faye. I've really enjoyed the conversation. And as I said at the start, it's a real privilege to be here. I'm doing various things at the moment. So I'm a qualified coach, and I'm happy to work with anybody in a coaching capacity. I'm also helping organizations through various consulting means with my former line manager. One of those people I mentioned before is being influential on my strategic thinking. And I think the best and quickest way of getting under the skin of it is get in touch with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share my URL. And where I can specifically help is as a sounding board, or if you need help really understanding what your business is about and how you can be and your function can be more strategic, I'm very happy to come and help do that. That's the work that I enjoy doing.
Fantastic. Well, I really will say goodbye now. It's been fabulous having you here today, and I hope that we get to catch up again soon.
Likewise. Thank you very much, Faye.
I really hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dean and that you found it helpful. If you did enjoy it and there's anything that you want to take away and put into action, please do let me know by liking the video on YouTube, leaving a comment, or sending me a message on LinkedIn. It is always brilliant to hear from you, and I hugely appreciate your feedback. And if you'd like to dive deeper into some of the things that we discussed today, there are a few other HR Coffee Time episodes that I mentioned while I was chatting with Dean, and so they're the ones that you might find useful to listen to next. They are episode 164, Becoming More Strategic as an HR Team, 3 Ways OKRs Can Help. Episode 148, Skills That Shape a Great CPO, Communication, Coaching and Curiosity with Jane Beeston, and episode 147, How to Become a Successful Chief People Officer, Insider Insights with Kanika Mehra. I'll make sure that I include links to all of those in the show notes and the YouTube description so they're easy for you to find. And if strategy is something you would like even more support with beyond this podcast, please do take a look at my Inspiring HR Leadership Programme. It's one of the core focuses of the programme, and I would love to welcome you onto the next cohort. Thank you so much for listening or watching today. I will be back again in 2 weeks' time with the next HR Coffee Time episode for you.